Hello and welcome back to the Leadership Circle Live, where today I'm actually doing a solo episode talking about the difference between personal responsibility and self-blame. So, as part of the self leadership principles, which are the principles that I have developed to help us as leaders build better relationships with ourselves, learning to lead ourselves so that we can effectively lead others, personal responsibility is actually the second principle behind self trust. And it's a really powerful one and it's a really exciting one. But what winds up happening for high achievers, for people who are control freaks by definition, is personal responsibility actually winds up leading to self-blame and kind of creating a space where we're beating ourselves up and we're making ourselves feel bad and we're creating really more stress in our lives than really intended. So this was a question when we were promoting our self leadership principles workshop that somebody had asked me, like, talk to me about personal responsibility. And I was like, oh, this is really great. And as I've learned, if one person has a question, a lot of people have the exact same question. So if we haven't met yet, my name is Ryan Dowdy. I am the CEO of Uncensored Consulting. I am the creator of the self-leadership principles, the 100K sales method, and the sales experience. And I am the founder of Be in the Room, which is our conscious leadership collective for successful women. And I love talking about the role that we play in our own success and how we have immensely more control over our success than we think that we do. So let's talk about, like, what is personal responsibility? When we talk about that idea, the way that we define personal responsibility inside of the self-leadership principles is that it's taking ownership for your life, right? It's taking full accountability for yourself, your thoughts, and your actions. Right? Complete and total radical responsibility. I create the results of my life. That through my thoughts, through my actions, through my feelings, through my emotions, I am creating the world around me. Right? I am step by step, day by day, actually creating the world that I live in, the circumstances that I live in. That is personal responsibility. We, as I said before, have immensely more power than we think that we do, than we've been taught to believe, right? We have not been taught to believe that we are the co-creators of our lives, that we get to intentionally create lives and businesses and experiences in a really meaningful way. And so personal responsibility is about knowing that and owning that, right? It's really about telling ourselves that we're not victims of our circumstances, right? It's saying, hey, there are things happening in the world, but they're not happening to me, right? I really like the idea that, life is happening for you, not to you. And personal responsibility owns that, right? It says, okay, I'm in charge here. If I don't like the result that I got from that last launch that I did, I can take responsibility for that, instead of being like, well, my Facebook ads blew up and so it didn't work. Or if you're leading a team of people and saying, okay, well, that person didn't perform the way that I thought they would, or they were not a great fit for our organization, instead of saying, hey, it was that person's fault. It's looking internally, right? Like, why did I hire somebody inside of my organization that's not a great fit? And so it's really about a lot of self-reflection, and it's really about understanding, okay, if I want a specific result, that I can get that specific result. It's meant to be empowering. It's meant to be exciting. And it's meant to put us back in the driver's seat of our lives, right? It's meant to really think about, the idea that the only thing that I can control in life is me. And so if I'm in control of me, how am I going to think? How am I going to act? How am I going to show up? What role do I play in all of these different circumstances? And so it's a very simple concept, but it's one that is not talked about a lot, or really only talked about in really spiritual ways, as far as like manifestation and different things like that. And so I wanted to kind of take the woo out of this and talk about, like, really what is personal responsibility as humans. And it's this idea that the only thing that we can control in life is ourselves. And the only thing we can control in life is our thoughts and how we show up and how we treat people in our relationship with ourselves. And so personal responsibility is taking that ownership. I sometimes will say radical responsibility. But what I really love about personal responsibility is the gift that it is to other people, right? When you take responsibility for yourselves, you will find that the people around you will also start taking responsibility for themselves. Right? So when you're saying, hey, I'm going to totally own the role that I played in this situation, the reason I didn't get the results that I want, or the reason I'm frustrated in this situation, or the reason, whatever it is, that it really empowers other people to do the same thing. So as we are leaders, as we lead our teams, as we lead our clients, as the way that we show up in leaders in our lives, we lead our families, we lead our homes. As we lead, the more personal responsibility we take, the more personal responsibility that we teach. Because personal responsibility is not about control. It's not about making your workload larger. And then I think kind of some of you is like, whoa. I don't need anything else to be responsible for, Ryan. I've got a full plate. I've got a full calendar. I'm busy all of the time. I'm wearing the role, the emotional load at home and all the different things that we carry as high achievers, right? But personal responsibility is saying is when I control myself, I empower the people around me to control them, to control themselves. And it's letting go of feeling the need to move all of the chess pieces across the board as we need to do and say, hey, if I show up as my highest and best self, and I bring my highest and best self, and I set intentions for the highest and best things to happen in every single situation, that is what I am creating, right? But what winds up happening is we tip the scales at some point in time, and we take personal responsibility, and we then turn it into blame. Right? It's my fault. I'm not good enough. I can't do anything right. I'm creating this. And then we wind up talking to ourselves in a very, very, very mean way. And then creating more of what we don't want. Right? It's what we give our attention. They say, that attention is such an powerful part of how we create our circumstances. But if we're giving the attention to all the ways that we're not good enough, or we did it wrong, or we didn't fulfill our responsibility, or whatever story it is that you're telling yourself, you're actually going to create the opposite result than personal responsibility was designed to really empower you to do, right? Because self-blame it's destructive. Right. It's really can get you into this space where, everything is my fault, and the sky is falling, and the world is bad, and I can't do anything right. And it's very, very, very important that we realize that personal responsibility is about creation, not about fault. Right. It's really about understanding that, okay, yeah, maybe you didn't show up as your best self. Right. But it's saying that and saying, how can I do this differently? Not how can I be the martyr of this situation? How can I make myself wrong in every single circumstances? How can I beat myself up over this? Because like I said, that's such a big part of what we do. And it's a very, very, very fine line that we walk. Right. Because, it can literally torpedo your success, right? If you're like, oh shit, that launch didn't go right. It's all my fault. I'm terrible. I'm never going to have a successful launch, is very different than that launch didn't go the way that I wanted to. How did I show up, right? What role did I play in that? Like, do you see the difference between those two questions, right? The question of like, okay, I screwed it up. This is never going to work. I'm terrible. I'm bad at launch, whatever your thing is, versus, okay, that didn't go the way I wanted it to, but I know that I can create the result that I want because I am radically responsible for my results. So I'm going to go, I'm going to go analyze the information and make a different decision, versus I am instead going to beat myself up, tell myself I'm not good enough, tell myself this isn't meant to be, tell myself it's never going to happen, so on and so forth, right? You make a bad hire, right? Say you hire somebody inside of the organization and they're not a great fit, right? Instead of being like, okay, how did I not set that person up for success? What can I do differently the next time I make a hire? How can I interview differently? What questions should I ask? Is there a different experience I should be asking for? Self-blame is, I suck at hiring. I'm no good at this. I'm not good at leading people. I'm not meant to be a leader. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. And again, it's such a fine line, but it's really all about perspective, right? It really is the difference in perspective, because again, personal responsibility is positive perspective. It's co-creation. It's designing the life of your dreams by intention. And self-blame is all negative and hate and beating yourself up. And we do not want that to happen. So if you catch yourself in that space where you're trying to take responsibility, you're trying to step into, okay, what role do I own here? And you find it taking a negative turn, it's really time to be like, okay, stop. I'm getting into blame. And that's not what this is about, right? This is not about blame. It's about taking responsibility. It's about co-creation, not that. And it really is an awareness. I don't have like a step-by-step process of like, okay, how do I stop doing this? Other than bringing the awareness, right? When, once we shine the light on something, when we can see something, once we're aware of something, we can start to notice it. So again, if you find yourself wearing that personal responsibility badge, like a badge of honor, so you can make yourself feel like garbage all the time, and start to think about like, why do I do that? Right? What situations does that come up? What circumstances is that coming up for me? Is very different than the idea of, okay, cool, I didn't get the result that I wanted, but I know that next time I will, and I'm going to go in this direction. So the first step is to really recognize it, to see it happening, and then to stop, right? Like once you see it happening, you got to stop. Okay, cool. I'm beating myself up. I have got to turn this off. I've got to look in a different direction. And then what I encourage you to think then is switch back over to, what am I doing right? Right? Okay, so I that person was not a great hire for our organization, but what did I do well? Right? What did I like about that? What went well? What things about that person did I enjoy? What role did I play really, really well? Because it's also going to help shift you out of that negative I suck, not good enough, never going to be a good leader, never going to be able to grow this company, never going to be able to get the results that I want, that you have a tendency to go in, right? So then it's like, okay, what went right? And then what can improve? So instead of what went wrong, how did I screw up? It's what went right and what areas do I want to improve? So sometimes it's just asking yourself a different question will shift that perception. But because our brains are wired for the negative, right? We've been taught that by society. Thank you very much. Our brains are wired for that. That's the first place that we're going to go. So the first things we have to do is catch it. And then we have to ask ourselves a different question, a more empowering question, a question that puts us back in that space of creation instead of that space of doom, gloom, self-hatred, really mean self-talk, is realizing it. And here's the deal, my friend, is if you're listening to this or you're watching this, I know some of you are here live with me. Some of you are going to watch this on the replay. Some of you are going to read this on our blog. You do so much negative self-talk that you might not even recognize it. You might not even recognize how frequently you are talking to yourself in a way that you would never talk to a friend, right? That's actually a really good kind of determining factor too of whether I am taking personal responsibility or self-blame is, would you say it to a friend? Right? Would you tell your friend that they were stupid and they were never going to make it as a manager or a leader? Probably not, right? You'd probably say, hey, these are things that went really well. Here's some opportunities for improvement. So, but the thing is like I said, we do it so frequently that we don't even recognize that it's happening. So what I like to really think about is, how do I know where I am on the scale? It's how do we feel, right? It's being in touch with our emotions. Emotional intelligence is actually the fifth principle in the self-leadership principles, but it's really being in touch with our emotions. It's recognizing our emotions and being like, okay, how do I feel right now? Right? Because if you feel like crap, you're probably playing the self-blame game, right? If you feel bad, if you're angry, sad, mad, anxious, right? You're very likely playing the blame game, because personal responsibility should feel excited and empowered and creative. Right? So it really is, how am I feeling? Like when I talk about this thing, this result that I did not get, when I speak about it, think about it, put it on paper, analyze it, am I feeling like garbage? Right? Or am I feeling empowered? Because if you are feeling like garbage, you're very likely playing the blame game. If you're feeling empowered, you're playing the personal responsibility game. And so it's really just shifting into, okay, how do I make this an empowering opportunity for myself? And the best way to do that is to really touch base with your feelings and see, how do I feel right now? And I know that, again, it's easier said than done because we're not taught to do this. We are not taught to tune into our feelings. We are not taught to think about, two sides of the same coin, because that's ultimately what they are, right? Personal responsibility and self-blame are just two sides of the same coin, and we're not taught to do that. So as you look at a situation where you perhaps didn't get the desired result, think about, how do I feel about this situation? And it's okay to feel I'm unhappy that I didn't get the result that I want, right? I'm frustrated because I thought it was going to go this way, or because I have to go back to the drawing board to hire somebody else, or I have to retool this launch or do something different, right? Like those are very normal emotions. But when we think about, okay, how do I do it better next time? Are we stuck in this really ugly, anxious place, or are we stuck in or are we shifting into this more empowered, creative, co-creative space? Because that's really the difference between the two. So would love to hear from you all. Tell me, like, how do you get yourself out of self-blame? How do you really recognize when you're not being productive, right? When you're really kind of in a destructive self-talk spiral, and how do you pull yourself out of it? I would love to hear that and hear from all of you. So thank you very much. We don't do a lot of just me here on the Leadership Circle. We love to feature the amazing women inside of me in the room, but I was excited to have this conversation with you all today. I thought it was such an excellent question and one that needed to be discussed. And we will see you all live next week. Bye now.